Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the Standing Policy Committee of Public Works to order. This is on Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024. I'm the chair today, Councillor Lukes for Waverly West. I'd like to welcome Councillor Chambers, Councillor Sharma, our senior clerk, Mr. Prinsloo, our departments that are here, people in the gallery, and people watching online. Now we have a short agenda because it just seems like we were here not that long ago. We do have a committee member who is unable to attend. Do we have a motion?
Move a motion to excuse Councillor Wyatt.
Sure.
I believe it's health reasons.
Yes, all right, okay, motion on the floor.
Personal family
matter, all in favor? Okay, carried. All right, and now I'd like to do the land and water acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory, the home of the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. And our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3. Now, could we have someone move the minutes of the last meeting, please?
So moved.
Councillor Chambers, all right, all in favor? Carried. All right, now I do want to say that we will be breaking at 10:40. All three of us have to go to an event, and we'll reconvene the meeting at 12:30 sharp. So that's that. Okay. All right, so now, senior clerk, let's start with delegations.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. First, we have Patrick Stewart, who is here to speak to report number 4, which is the Winnipeg Wheelchair Accessible Vehicle Pilot Project update. So outside.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Morning. Thanks for having me. I wrote a prepared statement this morning for coming in, and I kind of, at the end, I wasn't able to finish it, and that's the point I want to get to. Something about report number 4 that I think is worth discussing. But I will introduce myself. I'm Patrick Stewart. I'm a consultant with the Independent Living Resource Center. In addition to being a nonprofit organization that works towards the full integration of people with disabilities in Winnipeg, we're also a key partner in this project. We deliver the training for all of the drivers that are dispatched through the WAVE Central Dispatch Program. And we've been advocating for a program like this for many years. And we're really happy here today to celebrate and recognize the success of the Central Dispatch Program. This worked very effectively towards its primary goals, which are reducing and eliminating barriers that passengers often face to accessing vehicles for hire. These are long-standing historic problems to kind of go back to the very roots of why the city of Winnipeg is involved in regulating this industry that passengers routinely face. Up to 2 or 3 hours waiting for a vehicle. Drivers that often not had any training in how to use their equipment. And the report largely speaks for itself. It's really encouraging to see the growth in the use of the system, all of the numbers and metrics showing that customer service ratings and safety improvements and efficiency and volume and everything is going up and up and up. And that's really great. And that's really due to, I think, a trilateral partnership, which has eliminated some of the mystery, I think, between government regulators, industry, and community, not entirely understanding where everybody is always coming from, and working this way together collaboratively, we really hope is going to be the blueprint for the future. What I wanted to maybe address or highlight are a couple things from the report that really stands out. I was at a celebration of the event, or pardon me, of the program this summer with Mayor Gillingham, and all indications seem to be that everyone's ready to move forward with it and make it a permanent program, and that's really great. I think what I want to highlight and then kind of end on a really important question for this committee to consider is one, and I'm happy to say, endorse ILRC, the work that we're doing. The training really does make a huge difference. It really does. To get the ability to talk to drivers every couple of years, talk about changes to the bylaw, refreshers on how to use their equipment, all of these things, and to maintain some of these drivers we have now known for years. We have seen them multiple times. We have relationships with them, and we're actually able to take their concerns and triage them towards the parking authority as well. And that all works really, really good. And training is the only thing that really makes that possible. So we really hope that it remains central to however this program is structured. Another one of the items I wanted to bring up is the report recognizes that at its peak, I think it was 23, close to 25% of the volume of rides that were being done by this dispatch were on behalf of Transit Plus as an overflow. Now we know, and I know Transit Plus here will confirm that their new software system is working really well, and the need for these overflow trips is really reduced. But it doesn't mean it's not an important issue. One of the concerns that we heard from passengers was that basically the requirements from a taxi cab driver and from a Transit Plus driver in terms of service level, one being door to door and one being curb to curb, are different. And so for a passenger who's really, going from point A to point B, understanding maybe the nuances between different services that they might receive, and obviously keeping in mind that support, guiding, for example, passengers that are blind, coming to the door, these types of things. If we're ever going to return to a place where, and this happens in the winter time, right, when rides go up, where there's a really significant volume being done by Transit Plus, or pardon me, the Wave is doing Transit Plus work essentially. It's kind of being outsourced in a way. It is a really good idea. We stand by our training. But if this is going to be a significant factor in the future, I think we really need to look at harmonizing the service levels because, and this is where things become, interesting. Taxi rides, having the option to use a taxi for Transit Plus is great. It's great to have that option. It's great to have more vehicles on the road. They have access to all of this. The fleet has now expanded. That's really good. But if it becomes, very financially lucrative to kind of, structure things that way, if it's somehow, very cost effective, we might, not intentionally, but sort of see maybe a shrinking in primary Transit Plus resources and an expansion of the taxi cab. And especially in a circumstance like that, harmonizing service levels and what a customer can expect, I think is something worth pursuing. I had two more items that I wanted to address. The first one is really quick. The per trip incentives. That was a change that happened partway through this program, moving away from sort of longer term incentives, metrics that were, being available over longer periods of time and things like this, to a bonus per trip, $10 per trip or 15, I think, depending on the hour of the day. That's a great idea. And that's something that we had been hearing for years from drivers, that taxi cabs are 24-hour, it's kind of a 24-hour economy. Often drivers don't own their own vans. So they start in the hole. They're starting from a perspective of having to pay fuel, having to pay a daily rental charge for their vehicle. So being able to put money in the pockets of drivers for doing the work almost in real time. I know they're not getting the money right away. Great move. That was a really good move. And that's something that we want to see stay in there. Finally, kind of where I wanted to get to, and the item I think that should maybe have the most consideration, maybe has the biggest impact in this report, is a proposed change in the accessibility surcharge. So that's a per trip fee that really has financed this whole endeavor and everything else that we do in the name of accessibility when it comes to vehicle for hire. So previously, how it's been structured since the city took over regulating the industry, with 7 cents per trip to the dispatch company for fleets that don't meet 10% accessible vehicles. So what that kind of meant was that Duffy's was the first to meet 10%. Unicity, our understanding is they recently this year crossed the 10%. And Uber, who is maybe the most significant player in Winnipeg now, well, I think they're, as far as I know, they're at 0% still. So no real risk of them getting off the mat there. So what the proposed change is that the vehicle, that we stream it in two ways. That PTP providers, which is Uber, would now pay 10 cents per trip instead of 7 cents per trip. So their rate essentially is going up. But for the taxi cab industry, it's going to go down. It's going to go from 7 cents down to, I think, 3 cents per trip, but applied differently. Applied to every trip to the dispatch company, regardless if they meet the 10% threshold or not. Okay, so this is a change. And I wish people were here to sort of speak for themselves. But I think it would be fair to say that I have received concerns from the industry about the change, and that if dispatch companies are de-incentivized to reach that 10%, that we might see a rollback in the number of accessible taxi cabs on the road. So that's a concern coming from the industry. And that doesn't mean that the numbers here are going to do the job. That we've seen the rapid expanse in Uber, and maybe adding 3 cents to all of their trips is going to be really significant. It's not our job to necessarily run these numbers, and I don't doubt for a second that they were put together in a thoughtful way by Grant. But regardless, this is a concern that is coming from the industry. So what I wanted to sort of just spell out and then maybe answer questions, if you're interested, is maybe rather than sort of prescribing a specific number or structure of how this should be, some of the ways that it is done, maybe in different jurisdictions, would be helpful. So when our number was first established, 7 cents per trip, it was our first number ever, right? And one of our questions was, of course, looking at other jurisdictions is, do we kind of come up to par? And we would look across the country, in Ottawa, Calgary, and New York, and Seattle, and all these different cities that were sort of launching similar surcharges or similar programs. And we often saw numbers that were higher. We would often see numbers that were 12, 15, 25 cents, up there. And a reason why those numbers were different, though, was that they were often not charged to the dispatch company. They were put to the metered rate of the passenger's fare. And so that's a very different thing, right? And that's something that we have historically advocated for. And I will sort of say again that, speaking as someone who uses a taxi cab, if there was an additional 10 cents on my metered rate, I'm not even going to notice, let alone care about that. But for dispatch companies that deal with, huge volumes and obviously some very different structures here, the dispatch system that we have, the WAVE program, incentivizes drivers, incentivizes vehicle owners, but outside of a local provider providing the system and having a contract with the city, dispatchers aren't really incentivized is part of this program. Where their incentive has historically come is meeting that 10% of that fleet. That's where their discount has come from. So this change, this way that is being structured, is significant. And I think it's probably worth something understanding what the options are. And again, I'm not here to sort of say that there's anything wrong with the numbers that are being proposed, but that it is a dynamic issue. Oh, look at that. Wow, 0. Perfect. What's planned? Pardon?
We need more time?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Councillor Chambers.
Yeah, how do you incentivize dispatchers?
Oh, well, as has been done in the past, has been by reaching that 10% number, because then their surcharge goes away. The other way that you would incentivize, well, I don't know if incentivizes, they would love it, I guess, if it was maybe, as a flow through or however, that it was, passed along to the meter rate, of course. Incentivizing dispatchers, I don't really know, besides that. Like, when it comes to Uber, this is something that I've repeated, numerous times here, that there are sort of 2 dominant ways to think about accessibility in Uber, at least the example that I've seen. Either one, you mandate them to be accessible, or you tax them, right? You either tell them they have to have a certain number of vehicles, or that their metrics for accessible rides have to be the same as able-bodied rides, or you tax. Where you say, okay, you're never going to be accessible, you're not going to do the vehicles, so you're going to pay for those that do the vehicles.
But Uber is a little bit different than, say, the vans that we have out, in the sense that each Uber driver is a contracted person based on their ownership of their own vehicle.
How do you mean contracted?
Well, I own my own vehicle and
Yeah.
I'm providing the service, as opposed to the vans that may be owned by one company that they hire somebody to provide that service.
Yeah.
So how do you mandate me as a private person providing that service to change my business model?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's maybe the same way. It's not exactly apples and oranges when we think about the taxi cab industry. Like, the taxi cab industry is not a central organization that owns all of these vehicles either, right? It's made up of various shareholders and people that own any from 1 to multiple vans. It could be people that don't own their vehicles also. So, it kind of like, these economies have to kind of figure it out themselves, I guess, somehow. Like, Uber takes a percentage of the money from drivers, right? For access to their technology and for all of these things. So I don't know. I think the role of the city and the role of government and community oversight is really to sort of establish the standards, and then it's up to companies, right, to meet them and figure out how they're going to do that.
So I know that, based on my usage of Uber, you can request a certain vehicle, like, and that's typically if there's 4 or 5 of you, you can ask for an SUV or
Yeah, I've done that too. Yeah.
okay, so is that potentially a way of introducing more of those services through Uber?
As mentioned, Uber has no vehicles, no accessible vehicles that I'm aware of. So they're starting from a standpoint of zero. And I don't really anticipate that changing. Now, we do have many PTP carriers that are accessible, but they're exclusively accessible. So companies like Blue Line and Skyline, there's various ones that kind of pop up, All Access, et cetera, that meet that PTP. And that's an interesting difference in Winnipeg. We serve our largest PTP, 95% of it is not accessible. And then we sort of have niche carriers that just do accessible, but are within the same structure. I guess they're regulated the same way as Uber's. How to incentivize Uber to provide accessible vehicles, I have no idea. That's a global issue.
I'm thinking about it from the perspective of, meeting that 10% model where,
Yeah.
You get drivers that are, or people that are being added to that fleet or added to that network of Uber.
Yeah.
And it might be a challenge then for them to meet that 10%.
It can definitely be a challenge for sure, because the cost of owning an accessible vehicle, is recognized in this program, are often a lot higher than the vehicle renovation cost is very significant. The fuel costs are higher, et cetera, et cetera. So if you were an Uber style driver and not part of a company that is exclusively does accessible, there's not a lot of incentives for you there, right? Definitely.
But
You're not gonna get them from Uber.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But it is food for thought in terms of providing more accessible services when you need it.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely, and that's another big difference. I mean, the reason why we have such great numbers is because the city can regulate it, right? You just can't have, I can't just start a taxi cab company, right? It's tied to population, the vehicles are licensed, there's a lottery, and we've been able to, exclusively license accessible vehicles to get that number up. But we'll never have that opportunity with Uber. Oh, well, unless we decide to regulate it the same way, I suppose. The option is there, but
Councillor Sharma has a question.
Yeah.
Thank you. Patrick, you've answered some of my questions that I had. With respect to the surcharge, I did note that as well in the report. Did have a conversation with the chair as well. We saw that. Can you talk about the training a little bit more
Sure.
in terms of you administer the training? How long is it? Just give us a refresher. Where do you do the training? What is it all about?
Well, we don't
What's the response to the training?
okay, yeah, sure. Well, the training's gone very well. We do it just a few blocks from here. Our office and training room is in the Grain Exchange. The drivers are required. So the requirements of training, right, are set by the Winnipeg Parking Authority in most cases. And they're required to be part of the WAVE project. They have to have comfort training essentially once every 2 years. So what that training is going
Each driver,
each driver.
once every
Yeah,
2 years.
each driver comes every 2 years to recertify. Kind of like in the same way, like I continue to work part-time as a healthcare aide, and I need to recertify my first aid, for example, things like that.
Tracking that?
They do. They track that. It's we work in pretty close partnership with them. Only drivers that have been pre-approved for the training are allowed in the class, and then only those drivers that have received the training are allowed to be registered with the dispatch to receive the incentives and so on. And the training also really works because it's very focused on WAVE vehicles. We spend most of our time talking about the equipment, and it is really, really helpful to maybe have a class where they're all van drivers. We're all talking the same thing. We're talking about real world situations. We focus on the equipment, and it's also really valuable to help deliver information. If the vehicle for hire bylaw has made any changes, significant changes, in the
No,
past
not
times
on
we've seen them, we can give that too.
The pre-approval that you mentioned?
Yeah.
So they ask Unicity or Duffy, whoever they're working, that they'd like to be part of that program? How
I
does
don't think
that?
they have to go to them. They might just be able to go on their own to the parking authority.
So they're pre-approved and then come for training with you?
Yeah, we'll get a list from the parking authority. Often it'll say we have 20 drivers that need training. Can you set up some classes? We set up some classes. It's an hour long.
So 1 hour every 2 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In addition to, I should mention that's to be involved in the WAVE program. They're still required to do the standard training and recertification process that every taxi cab driver has to do just to maintain their basic taxi cab driver's license.
Thank you.
Oh,
Okay. Okay, well, I think Grant Heather might be showing up at some point and we'll talk to him about that. I too had asked about the fees, you know.
Yeah.
Because they are different across cities and I remember when this all came in, I wanted the fee to be higher, so.
yeah.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right, well, but overall, I think
Overall,
we're all very happy with this, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, very happy. Okay. Okay, super. Thank you very much, Patrick. Thank you
Most
for
welcome.
your advocacy and for your work on this. And just one last thing. Did you tell Mr. Heather, have you talked to Mr. Heather about your points?
No, I read it yesterday afternoon.
I encourage you to, because he's really,
But it's nothing, again, I'm not being prescriptive with it, and this is nothing that I haven't talked to Grant about for many years.
okay,
So it's gonna be nothing new for him to see.
super.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now our next delegation, Mr. Clerk here is.
Next up, we have Mark Coho on 2 items, report 7 and 8, and he's joining us via Zoom.
All right.
Wonder if I can just share a screen. With, what was sent to you previously.
Yeah, please go ahead.
This is the right one. Okay. So I'm just going to move it down here. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak. What I really want to speak to you today about is the Concordia Lagimodiere twin overpasses rehabilitation. We think we're missing an opportunity here. As you know, the project is part of the pedestrian and cycling strategies that were adopted in 2015, and this is also part of the draft bicycle plan presented as part of the public engagement process for the Transportation Master Plan 2050. And our concern is that the opportunity to include a through pass connecting Ravelston Avenue West to Calderbeck Avenue has been removed from this project, something we were part of a stakeholder group looking into. You know, and it was a very promising design. We've seen the benefit brought about by the through pass that was included in the rehabilitation of the Seine River Bridge on Fermor Avenue, and really missing that same opportunity with the Concordia Lagimodiere twin overpasses projects. We really think it would be a huge loss for the city. You know, in terms of our Winnipeg support, maybe I will just scroll through here. I believe this is the map here, kind of, and I think you kind of have it as well. But just to show you, this is sort of that Calderbeck Ravelston connection with the through pass, and that is Lagimodiere there, sort of going through Concordia, the railway. There are plans to have a pathway along Concordia and a pathway sort of along Lagimodiere that would connect to Reinders, provide access either way. But you know, as I show you on that previous screen, it's a pretty substantial detour. So when we're looking at someone passing from going from Concordia at Panet, you know, from Ravelston and Transcona, so basically here to Concordia at Panet over here, the distance is, you know, 0.7 kilometer difference. If they're going to Panet and Molson, you know, to sort of connect into this proposed route along the bike, our proposed bike network, it's a full kilometer detour. So a pretty substantial detour that we're asking people to make here, and that's something we really think, you know, it's a rehabilitation like this is really a 1 in 25 year opportunity. It's something we're going through that process of doing it. It's where we can, you know, we're shutting down 2 lanes of that roadway, one direction of the road as we do that rehabilitation over 2 years. So we have that opportunity to do a cut and cover through pass tunnel, and yet we seem to have decided not to do it without really moving forward. I don't think there's been any really public input on that. Certainly we've provided input through the stakeholder process, but this might, for all I know, is the first time any of you are hearing about it, that we are kind of not doing this through pass. You know, so certainly looking at support for this, in our Winnipeg support, really objective 2 and under environmental resilience is to prioritize sustainable transportation as a mobility options of choice, good health and well-being, enable access to basic needs for good physical and mental health, support positive health outcomes through the built natural environments, and city building, integrate resilient land use, transportation, infrastructure planning, and investments. So this through pass would really be a hub connecting routes along Ravelston and Transcona, Concordia, Molson, Panet, the Kenora line, which we hope to do a rail trail, Monroe, and the Transcona Trail. As you can see, they're all sort of linked in there. We eventually hope to have a walk bike bridge over the Red River, connect sort of that Concordia as a midpoint crossing between the Harry Lazarenko Bridge and the Chief Peguis Bridge. And that's been reinforced both in the 2015 plan and the 2050 Transportation Master Plan project. So it's something that we really think is important. So I'm asking you to push for this, to make sure we're getting this included. It's been on the plan since 2015. We think we should have been budgeting for this all the way through. And I think it's something that is really critical. If we do want to get people biking, if we do want to get them reach those numbers of doubling and tripling the number of people that are walking and biking, we need to be providing those direct routes for people. Asking to detour, on what might be 20% of their trip, going out of their way, putting them through more traffic, I think causes concern on our ability to reach those goals. So that's what I'm looking for there. We don't really even know what the cost of doing this in the future might be. We haven't seen any cost comparisons of why we're leaving this out. So it's very hard to see where we're going here. From an information standpoint, we're getting very little information. So second item I'd like to speak to is sort of item number 7, which is that transportation plan. And in there, really, I guess I have a question that I'd like to ask. It's more of a clarification question too. With regard to the Northwest Hydro Corridor project, there's $500,000 allocated, I believe, is either 2025 or 2026. It's 2026. So the question is is that sort of rolling over from previous funding, or is that new funding that's been added that they've I guess decided it's going to cost more than they had originally allocated? So I'm not 100% sure on that. Just from the wording in the report of what that is. So I'm hoping you can ask for some clarification on that point. And certainly as well to ask, whether or not that within that report that it's sort of funding that is required. They're saying it's been pushed over into a future year. So I'm hoping we can look into whether or not that extra cost is really a result of not having the staffing to push these projects forward in a timely manner, or if it is just that we're developing more, the costs have gone a little larger than we've provided for in the past in previous budgets. So that is the question I have there. And the other question I have, certainly with the report on the pedestrian and cycling activities, sort of item number 7, is it seems a bit late in the process to be having a report come out in 2023 that details where we haven't been able to include walking and cycling facilities, without ever really having any potential input into that process and into that discussion, to talk about alternatives, which also don't seem to be included in that item 7 report, despite really that being part of the process, is to look for alternatives when we decide we can't put a cycling facility along the route showcased in the transfer or in the pedestrian and cycling strategies. So I'm not sure where that is, and it might be just something that we can update that process for, so that we do have situations where we're not including walking or cycling. There is a way to interact with that, to have discussion, and to provide feedback and alternatives, and to really bump that up from an admin decision that comes forward 2 years after the fact to something that's coming up before, that construction has taken place. So thanks for your time. If you have any questions, be happy to answer. And I'll stop sharing here as well.
Thank you, Mark, for the presentation this morning. 2 questions. With that map that you had as part of your presentation, would you be able to share that with us?
Online.
Yeah, it's online. So I provided it when I submitted my delegation. So it'll be in the agenda.
Okay. Have you had an opportunity to speak with the area councilors, both Councillor, Schreier and Councillor Wyatt, with respect to this plan?
Yeah, I did have a quick discussion with Councillor Wyatt, so I know he's in favor of having that Carlsbad-Ravelston through pass. And it's sort of within his words, so I haven't necessarily talked with Councillor Schreier. Certainly I know he's, we have had discussions with him about getting some active transportation facilities, and he's been generally in favor of getting new facilities in there. So, this is sort of that connection east-west through Elmwood, and it really does, with it being along Molson, Panet, that sort of rail corridor, and its connections into his community that really make a pretty substantial difference in terms of, getting out to employment as well from his community.
So you have had discussions with both councillors?
Yeah, quick discussions, yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I have a couple questions. Thank you, Mark, for your coming forward with this. So that's a spectacular map you have for number 7. Where did you get that map? Did you guys make
one? Yeah, that's one we've created, including a little spelling mistake on through pass there. So it is based on sort of what the plan is and what the projects are, and some recommendations we've had. But I believe, other than the Castle Manhattan Beach, I believe all are included in that TMP 2050 update. So everything that you're seeing in there is part of that plan. It's also coming from some of the stakeholder meetings that we had around the Lagimodi Twin Bridges.
Okay, so let's put that on our agenda for our meeting coming up on the 15th.
Absolutely, yes.
Put on the agenda, and I'm going to send you guys an email on just some other things we should put on the agenda. So for sure, we'll put this on the agenda because it just seems like a hub. I totally hear what you're saying. And I wanted to talk about the street renewal projects. Okay, so this is an interesting one. So, I don't know, I'm going to say maybe 3 years ago, or what's the history here? Oh yeah, look, the history's in here. May of 2021, I brought forward this motion that the public service be directed to consult with councillors on the reallocation. Okay, that was the reallocation. So the public service comes forward and they go, well, this is on the network, this should be here. But either A, we can't put it here, such as sidewalk not technically feasible. There's a few of those, feasibility under review for the future. Now there's a couple, and I'll talk to my specific one on 12, Lakeshore Road, Chancellor Drive, and frontage. Okay, so the story behind that was it was a road renewal. Okay, maybe it was a rehabilitation. I can't remember what it was, but it literally didn't make sense to put that little section of trail in there when it could have been put somewhere else and been more effective. So I wanted to scoop that money that would have been for that pathway to put it to a higher priority, right? So this is, when some roads are getting renewed, they look at it and in the ward, does it work? Doesn't it work? But that didn't, that, I can't reallocate that money. That would take a whole counselor decision, and that's something we could look at it again. But I hear what you're saying. You want to have a little more input. They do come to the counselors, but you know, that's a whole, that's interesting,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I think it's adding the transparency to the process.
Yeah.
And it's, hopefully, like, we can provide, like, I think there was from 2021 as well, there was sort of a newer kind of complete streets policy passed, and it really calls for thinking about the alternatives. And I'm okay with, when we decide we can't do something,
Right.
moving it to an alternative and getting that alternative built. I think that's reasonable, but I think, I would hope that we can involve more people in that process, so we can get better solutions, ideally,
Yeah.
and then we can get more knowledge coming into that decision making process, and as well, so we kind of have a bit of a recording of where it's gone, and when things are sort of pull out of the network because we're deciding that we can't put them in, or it's unfeasible, that we're thinking about what are the implications for the network then when we're pulling something out,
Yeah.
because that changes our planning, and it changes everything else. We have to
Yeah.
modify and recalibrate after we do that.
Okay, so when we have the public service here, maybe we'll add the advisory committee to the group of discussions. Right? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think so.
Because advisory group meets what, 4 times a year?
About 4, 5, 6. It
Sure.
kind of depends a little bit on what's happening and availability.
Sure. So I totally hear you on that. So we'll bring that up when we speak to, I don't know, Mr. Patman or Bears House here, whoever's speaking to it. Okay.
Perfect. I appreciate that. And yeah,
Okay.
just to add clarification and transparency, I think it would be beneficial.
Yeah, totally hear you. Okay, all right. So I look forward to our upcoming meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you for the
Absolutely.
incredible bike valet support on the weekend at the Bridgewater Block
Absolutely.
150. Really appreciate that. And thank you for your work. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time today, counselors.
Okay, all right. Okay, now we have our next delegation, and I think one of those items that Mr. Grant's speaking to is going to be laid over. Is that correct?
Number 3 is a request for extension of time, so any comments
Right.
pursuant to that should be to the extension of time request.
Got it. Okay. Did you get that, Mr. Grant?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay, great.
That's my first sentence. Thank you.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
All right.
And
Good
I
morning.
want to thank you and good morning. And thanks to Mark. I've had nice conversations with him when I run into him on bike corrals and stuff. Anyway, on the topic of bus fares, topic 3, and I want to start off by saying the length of delay granted was not justified, in my opinion. Freeloading costs us millions each year. Solving this was an election issue in 2022. So we're 2 years later, and this is being kicked down the road some more. Now, the way it's worded, it is a big job, but it does seem that things like this, if they're only going to involve a few tens of hours, shouldn't take years. Anyway, and related to this, and I say it is related, the idea of off-peak reduced fares is related to fare collection and how much money is taken in at the fare box. Off-peak reduced fares was raised at a transit open house at the U of W many years ago. Everyone there loved the idea, including the transit staff. The previous Public Works chair dealt with this issue when it was presented, but failed to grasp the idea of off-peak pricing. He introduced anytime reduced pricing and made rush hour incrementally worse. Making travel free or nearly free for anyone with a transit card off-peak provides an incentive for everyone to travel after or before rush hour if they can. Sorry about that. This relieves the bus too full problem, and that's one of the biggest problems transit has. People are waiting for their bus and it just goes by them because it's full. If 10% of those people were traveling an hour earlier, the bus wouldn't be full with the same staff levels. It also introduces folks to bus travel if it's been many years since they were on a bus. And this is done at very low cost to transit. Half the buses I see have less than 10 passengers. Off-peak pricing would fix that. So that's something that I don't think it's not in the wording I've seen in requesting where council requests transit to prepare to deal with the freeloading and the bus fare decisions, because if you charge more, you deter people. Anyway, moving on from that to topic 5. A little water here. Sorry about that. On PE. It is beyond ironic to see another call for a PE study. The city's chronic failure to report on safety is unlawful. It has also allowed the program to go very far off the rails. Deployment decisions are made to maximize income. There is no sign that any such decision is made to deal with and reduce a specific danger. I've been a fan of speed enforcement for many decades. PE was an election issue in BC long ago. The party that promised to eliminate it won the election, and it was gone. Ticketing went on, but with the demerit system in place, the worst drivers were effectively deterred, because the demerit system is a very powerful weapon against chronic bad drivers. In Winnipeg, the craziest driver continues to speed and just pays the fines, even if they have no license or are impaired at the time or have a vehicle filled with the proceeds of crime. When PE was suggested to local politicians long ago, they correctly rejected it. The contract was too rich for the PE company. PE was known to make roads less safe. John Butcher was the only person at Winnipeg Police speaking in favor. Senior traffic officers were strongly against it. They pointed out that in-person ticketing for red lights and speed brings in a bumper crop of other convictions for those involved in crime and for operating without a license or without insurance. PE can do none of this important police work. Surprisingly, police announced that they would, in the days when they couldn't get their contract, that they would not enforce red lights until there was a PE contract. During the months of non-enforcement, my son was hit by a guy blowing through a red light at Taylor and Stafford. Luckily, he was not seriously injured, and there were witnesses. It remains a dark period, in my opinion, in the history of the Winnipeg Police to announce that they were going to enforce an important rule like red lights. But the arm twisting worked. A PE contract was signed, and John was rewarded by being hired to run the PE system. In case anyone's unaware, the provincial law that enables Winnipeg to use PE requires that a report be issued every year for every location where it's used. These reports are supposed to explain the data on how crashes or other dangers were reduced at that intersection. And in the early years, data showed that crashes increased as sometimes one driver panic brakes at the sight of an amber and the driver behind can't stop as fast. Doesn't happen often, but often enough statistically citywide. Rather than tell the truth, no reports were issued from day one. The city actually claimed that MPI had no crash data. This is in the early years, like 20 years ago. One thing MPI is very good at is keeping track of crash data. So it's not credible to say that there were none. By hiding all the crash data for PE locations, the safety myths can be used forever to call for increased PE enforcement. Anyone calling for more enforcement should be aware that PE operators avoid times when they are needed. 3 times a day, the roads around a school get busy with kids and parents. When there are kids on the sidewalk and roads, there is no PE. This is driven by the fact that no one tends to speed at those times. 7 a.m. on a holiday, 0 kids, but PE will be parked in a school zone. And that's because they're driven by not the fact that there are kids to protect, but that there is money to be made. And again, their employer harvests that money too. So they have an obvious incentive. Can't call it a conflict because that's what they're there for. 5 years ago, coming up this month, the minister set in motion a review of PE by an outside contractor. An RFP was to be issued by November 2019. After his office was called by folks from the city and the police, the review process died. Instead of simply calling for more PE, the data on crash frequency and PE should be prepared and published. But if that data shows, like it has elsewhere, that PE causes a new net increase in crashes, we should move on to productive focuses for enforcement and actually make the roads safer. And obviously, enforcement with a real officer identifying the driver and therefore invoking the demerit system has a huge effect on the very worst of our drivers. In 2014, Pegham's elected council picked me to chair a committee to study the appeal of a complaint, engineering complaint, based on how short amber durations were making our roads safe, if they were, while they enhanced the income of the PE system. Did you know that a long vehicle, like a bus or a heavy truck, cannot be operated lawfully at low speeds when an amber appears? There is a problem in our law and our amber durations. This is one thing our engineering study, another engineer and I spent 6 months on this topic and investigated it thoroughly. And there are times when it's just not possible to drive a bus lawfully when you approach an intersection at 20 kilometers, which happens all the time, especially when it's slippery. But when you enter the intersection slowly, there's no way you can clear on red. So we do need changes in the law, and we need better ambers. And that's a different issue than this one. But it's if you're fixing the PE system, you would fix the other things related. It's chilling to realize how powerful a PE system is. The defending short ambers interfered with the regulation of engineering because that complaint was thrown out politically. Just as the defending the short ambers mess with the processes of the legislature on doing a legitimate review. Protecting PE has led to countless officials failing to notice the unlawful way that PE operates, mainly because of the lack of reporting, and the fact that it has operated without a contract for so many years now. There are rules in the PE handbook. So the machine, the Dragon Cam operating manual, says follow these rules. Now, our PE people, are routinely violating those rules in directions that would allow, we have no evidence that they cheated, but it would allow for cheating. And that's why the manual, the manufacturer says you must do this stuff to get honest readings. Now, because they're not operating them properly, there are two different very easy methods to cheat and give tickets out to people who were not speeding or were not going 12 over. But we don't require them to follow their own operating manual and follow the law. If this process, the operation of PE were legitimate, like your topic 4, the wheelchair accessible vehicle rules, we would expect open discussion, fully lawful operation, and
Wind up here, 1 minute, wind up.
I'm done. That was my last word, is that
Good.
if we operated it lawfully, properly, like the WAV system is, it would be better. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. I just want to make a comment on this report on photo enforcement, okay? So I hear you when you say that, sure, if we had a police officer stop someone, other infractions would probably show up. That would be great. There'd be other things that could be, discovered, let's say. But the reality is, cities all around the world are using photo enforcement to make their roads safer. The fact of the matter is, we have an outdated system that the last government failed on taking action on. Councillor Chambers and I went down to see the last government. Councillor Chambers and I have been down to see the current government to talk about this. It's a hot potato for any government, I will admit that, to take on photo enforcement. In my opinion, a lot of it is because we are using what I truly believe is currently a flawed method, outdated technology. We all understand the system that was put in place back in the day. And But the fact of the matter is, we can't have police absolutely everywhere, and technology can be used to have a positive impact on speeding. So like you probably saw this. Oh, I just lost it here. But here we go. So this was just put out Monday night. Some motorist was driving 180 kilometers in a 100-kilometer zone on the perimeter highway near Wilkes, 80 kilometers over the limit. The driver had a suspended license. And he only got $1,700 in fines.
Right.
I think he should have been thrown in jail, honestly. That it's not acceptable, but digital or electronic photo radar, electronic photo enforcement has been proven time and time again. Study New Zealand, study Australia. They have incredible road safety, good track record, and they've been using photo enforcement in a proper way. So, you know, we are frustrated here. Councillor Chambers will be speaking to this, I'm sure now, and when the report comes forward, but we are very frustrated with this. We hold great optimism that the current government recognizes the severity of speeding on roads and that we'll do something about this. We've laid low on pressuring them, but I think we're going to have to amp it up a bit. So I just wanted you to know that did you know that I don't necessarily agree with what you're saying?
Okay, now, you're right, you're correct that enforcement operations use photo around the world, but you're saying that it's done for safety. Now, if there is data, as Winnipeg was supposed to start providing 20 years ago, if there is data that says that the intersections where there is a camera are the ones that are safer, then that statement that it's done for safety is valid. If there is no data, and in Winnipeg we have no official data over the 20 years.
Method, flawed system.
But at the time, 20 years ago, it was the best there was. And that system had no data saying it was safer. So it's profitable. We know that the operators make their income, the operating company makes profit, and the government, we'll say it, makes profit in Manitoba and Winnipeg. So it's operated and we know it's profitable and we have no evidence that it's safer. Now, the other side, since you mentioned that we can't have people doing this all the time, in most municipalities, the enforcement is not by police sitting in a vacant lot with a radar gun, or at Waverly and Sandusky with a radar gun. It's done by radar in the car. So as they're patrolling or as they're going from A to B, the radar is on. And if they've got a time, they'll pull the guy over because the thing shows up. Now, there's no reason we can't have, if we're going to go to new technology, that we can't have the next level of photo radar where it doesn't just issue a ticket, but it alarms the system. In other words, the photo radar device calls out to cars in the area to say, yellow Toyota, 20 over, and the location. And that person can be identified and pulled over. So the production of tickets can be much more efficient if it's a hybrid system. The machine identifies the speeder, and if practical, the uniformed officer pulls that person over and checks it out. And if it is a slow night, a slow Tuesday night, and there's a patrol officer driving down Portage and somebody's blown a light 2 blocks away, that machine lets him know and he's pulled over and his contraband, his back seat full of cigarettes or whatever, is captured. So there are opportunities to do better, but it should, if you're going to use safety as a cause, I would suggest that the safety data actually be published. And I'm not sure that it is. As I say, there's lots of evidence that these minor tail lane crashes go way up. When there's that.
Well, we have a flawed method. We know that. We don't have data. I totally hear you on the rear ending. I was in a bus that rear-ended a car on St. Mary's many years ago. So yeah, it's a flawed method. There's many other methods out there. I think the big picture point of all this is we got to get rid of what we have. We have to figure out what the new method is. Our hands are tied, but the city wants to do this because of this insanity of speed. So I highly encourage you to speak to your new MLA and get her to do something about this. I'll be speaking to mine. Councillor Chambers, you have a question?
Yes, thank you for your presentation this morning. A lot of work. Sorry, I should backtrack. There was a review of the image capturing photo enforcement program that was scheduled by the previous government prior to COVID.
Mhm.
It happened and it seemed to get sidetracked. And as a result, we're, at a point where we're looking at the equipment, looking at the technology and realizing that it is close to 23 years old. Some of the comments I've made in the past with respect to this technology is if you look at your cell phone from 23 years ago to what it is currently, it's gone through multiple iterations and improvements in terms of that technology. Certainly, the current technology of photo enforcement is very limited in its scope. And I know that the service itself is looking to, getting improved technology as well as expanding it to areas that didn't exist 23 years ago. You look at areas like Waverly West and Bridgewater and Sage Creek and Amber Trails and Canterbury Trails. Those neighborhoods didn't exist to the extent that they do now. So, looking at that technology, we need to revisit it to make it, a more effective program. I also note that in discussion with other jurisdictions throughout the province that they're interested in this technology. Right now, Winnipeg is the only jurisdiction that has this technology or has this program in place. But other centers, as they're growing, like Brandon, Winkler, Morden, Thompson, and others, are also looking for this technology as it does free up police resources from traffic duty and works towards keeping residents safe from speeders and those that are, going through red lights and things like that. So, in terms of this motion that was provided, it is that comprehensive review. But I also note that there are discussions that are happening that, perhaps we need to wait for those discussions to happen and see what fruit is born out of that.
That's good point, sir. And as far as that 2019, I did make reference. I had a paragraph on that very troubling incident where Ron announced to the media that he was going to do that announcement 5 years ago, a couple of weeks from now in 5 years, and that it was mysteriously dropped. I've known Ron, I've talked to him since, and he's not going there, but his office did receive calls, and soon after that it was, then it never was followed up with an RFP. And so that was a bit troubling. But as far as technology, the speedometers that we use to keep our roads safe in our car and making our decisions on whether to get on or off the gas, that's old technology too, and it works very well. But because we now have 30 zones in around schools, and our eyes are supposed to be entirely on the road, looking for kids, looking for other trouble, and not focusing down low, dark on a speedometer. I've recently got one of those heads-up displays. So now, as I'm scanning the horizon for problems, my digital speed of going 28 kilometers is displayed right in that same field of view. So that's, again, you're right that new technology is a good thing. It can make things safer. Even if we're depending on the basic old speedometer, having a GPS speedo heads-up is a huge enhancement. And that's another one of the problems. If we're photo enforcing speed in school zones, then we are, and people are doing that carefully. You can't set your cruise for 20 kilometers because the car manufacturers don't have them go below 50 or so. And so you're stuck with either keeping your speed carefully with, watching the speedo as you adjust up and down with the pedal, or wandering accidentally over that 30 limit. So that's one of the other problems.
I can just interject here real quick. And again, what we're looking at here is road safety, a vision zero strategy. Back in 2022, there was a record number of road fatalities. And I think that's what inspired me to table this motion, because we have to move towards that zero vision where pedestrians and cyclists and kids are safe, seniors are safe on our roadways. And again, back in 2022, having that record number of road fatalities, I think demonstrates that we need to look at all of the tools available, whether that's through traffic calming measures, whether it's through programs like photo enforcement, and all of the different strategies to reduce those numbers and make sure that our pedestrians, cyclists, children, and seniors are safe.
And entirely agreed. And I'm not just an annoying person that reads your agendas. I am a safety advocate. I have gone to school boards to advocate that they bring in Elmo the safety elephant, and they refuse. I've done lots of that kind of stuff. And as I say, the enforcement in school zones is certainly worth doing. It's worth having extra safety there. And so I agree with what you're saying. But anyway, thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Grant. Appreciate your perspectives. Get out there and call your local MP.
Okay. But on the other hand, could the city not, especially with two of its most powerful and learned councillors at this table, could the city not just have the WPS issue the report called for in the initial legislation on analyzing a busy intersection safety camera location for the crash data before and after the camera was there?
Okay,
because that's what's required.
I said I'd ask that one other presentation you made and I forgot, but I got it starred here to ask them about that
And,
on the agenda.
and I would argue that there are three very capable councillors at this
Oh,
table.
no, I'm at one because she's the chair and one because he sits on the police board. No, I'm very well aware of the third councillor's position, but it was just the idea that the city has.
David, I just wanted to thank you for your remarks, and
Okay.
I've heard you many times at this committee and council advocating for various things, so I do hear you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, transit. We're gonna break now. We have to go to an event. Oh, we thought we'd get through.
What time would you like us back?
We're gonna start at 12:30 sharp.
12:30.
12:30.
Promise.
Promise. All right, everyone, I'd like to reconvene this meeting of Public Works, and we'll start now. We've done our delegations, correct, Mr. Clerk? And we will start with reports.
Great. For our first report is our verbal report, Transit Advisory Committee update on Shields. We've got Rick Young here, Manager of Operations, to present.
Good afternoon. This is just a verbal report, so I'll just read some notes. We've had several meetings. Feedback from the committee is continuing to work with the manufacturer to produce what is called a static shield. ATU also asked us to wait until they returned from a conference in Ontario as they were going to look at the different style of shields while we were there. The executive vice president at our last meeting, which was just earlier this week, sent us over 100 pictures for us to look at. But out of those 100 pictures so far, we have sent 2 options to the manufacturer for feedback on what they may be able to do to help us. One is a static shield design, which they responded will get back to us in a couple of weeks. And the other option is a new stanchion bar that will go around the fare box, which makes leaning into the driver's compartment more difficult. So it'd be harder for people to grab the shield or to reach the operator. So that is my update to date so far.
Okay.
Just elaborate on that new element that you.
The new element, all it is, and we've asked the manufacturer if they can do it, we only have a picture of it, but what it is it goes along the stanchion bar along the front of the windshield. Then it's going to wrap around the fare box and go back onto where the other stanchion bar goes behind the fare box. And what that'll do, it'll force people to step away from the shield so they won't be able to reach. It's at just enough level, high enough level, so you can't lean over and get a good grasp of anything. So
What's that called?
it's a stanchion bar.
How was that introduced into the?
It was brought through ATU from going to that conference.
It's not Shen,
STANCHIOM.
Okay, but I think it's important to note in regards to these shields, okay, you've heard us talk about shields before. I'm on the committee and what we had, there was the first round of shields that went in, half shields or partial shields, I guess you call them. And then we made it really, really accessible for the drivers to test out these new shields. Now, we encouraged ATU encouraged their members, everyone encouraged everyone to try out the shields. So out of, I don't know, what, 600, how many drivers? 1,100 drivers, what percentage gave feedback?
Less than 17.
Less than 17%, okay? So less than 17%. So this is good that we're looking at shields and that we're going down the avenue of looking at shields. But I just want to put it on the record, and I've talked to ATU and everyone about this also, is, you know, if a shield's $25,000 a shield or something, like we really have to look, like if the drivers don't want the shields, I don't know, we're only getting a 17% feedback. We
Well,
gave
and-
lots of,
and that's a great point. I mean, 17% doesn't represent a majority.
Yeah.
You know, and I wonder if there's some level of apathy here in terms of non-response. If it is implemented, would there be further concern of drivers that, what is it, 83% that didn't respond? Like,
well, I
what would
think
they
we
say?
want to see at least 80% responding,
Yeah.
you know? So anyways, we're investigating this and everything, but just so you know that there's, you know, and you know as well as I do, we do a crime forum.
Yeah.
I didn't get anyone out hardly because we have crime, but it's not an issue. But let's say I do a rooming house event, I get 200 people out. When there's an issue, people come out. So it's just something I just wanted to note. And Rick and his team and ATU are exploring these avenues, but we just need to be cognizant of that.
I've got a question. Remind us how bus drivers can give their feedback. Was it made
Well,
easy for
feedback's
them to
over
give
now.
feedback? Right,
So-
but what was the case? What options did they have?
The last options we had, we put 2 shield extensions in, one of. Sorry,
No, go ahead.
one of, I think 15 inches and one of 16 inches.
They were actually in the bus?
They were actually in the
Right.
bus. We had operators come down to see them. We put them in strategic places throughout the city, so operators can look at it at terminals, say for Garden City, Leela, Shopping Center, University of Manitoba. And they could, at that time, they could do it one of 2 ways. They could do the City of Winnipeg survey or the transit survey, or they could do the ATU survey. Under both, they were less than 17%. And I'm using 17% as a high number because we only had about 117 actually participate, which would be less than 17%. But yes, they could either do it manually, we left sheets on the bus to fill out, or they could do it like fun.
Okay, Councillor Chambers.
So thank you for that. It would be equally interesting to understand what the impact of the community safety officers who are now aboard some buses, what impact that's had on driver safety or the perception of driver safety.
Well, I would rely on Bob Christmas to answer that question, to be honest, but the feedback we've been getting and the feedback Bob gave us at our last TAC meeting is that overwhelmingly operators are encouraged that they're out there. But I have actually not done a survey or anything like that, but you'll always have 1 or 2 people that don't like what's going on. But overall, the appetite has been very open and a lot of operators are encouraged that we've seen them on the bus.
Do you think at some point that we can get a report back from, I mean, it's not quite a year yet, but at least 6 months, get a report back from Bob Christmas?
Yeah, we've asked, he's going to put something together for council, for all of council, because he's been coming to the advisory committee and safety committee and giving us updates and incredibly positive updates. We all need positive news. So we asked him to come back with an
Yeah.
update.
And as important as it is for him to provide a perspective, it would be interesting, I mean, to kind of, whether it's straw poll with transit operators just to get their perception, because they're the ones that would be impacted, having that community safety officer on as a ride along. So.
All right, so that's the report. I guess motion to receive the verbal report.
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Carried. All right, now the next report is report number 2.
The award of contract for the provision of accessible transportation from Winnipeg Transit Plus. I got Teresa Platt here, Manager of Client Services, who's going to present that.
Thank you. So as a reminder, the private contractors deliver service for Transit Plus. The Paratransit Division of Winnipeg Transit offers this service, which is a pre-booked door-to-door service to individuals who cannot use the conventional transit service some or all of the time. This report is for the award of a contract to Emergency Essentials, Inc. to provide accessible transportation for Winnipeg Transit Plus. The estimated cost is $1.3 million. With the annual inflationary adjustment estimated at 5% applied. And the procurement is through the request for proposal RFP process. The scope of RFP for 2024 includes the delivery of accessible transportation services to ambulatory Winnipeg Transit Plus customers. It requires the use of 5 light passenger vehicles, which are SUVs, and with 1 spare vehicle. The service shall be provided on an as required basis, which is estimated about 14,872 vehicle hours annually. It's set to begin on November 1st, 2024, and continue until October 31st, 2026. And this contract replaces an expiring contract with a similar scope.
Okay, so you recall that we're consolidating our contracts, right? We're consolidating them. So we have not as many contracts, and this is kind of a, I don't want to call it a catch-up interim
Alignment.
alignment. It's an alignment. It's not like a great big contract, but it's just to bring it up so that they can continue merging them in time. Okay?
So in terms of Transit Plus, and you heard Patrick Stewart this morning talk about the fact that Uber doesn't have any vehicles that are accessible. Have you done any research from an environmental scan perspective to see if there are other cities where Uber is part of that fleet and providing that service?
Yes, we belong to the Accessible Transit Committee for the CUTA, the Canadian Urban Transportation Association. We work closely with them and have monthly meetings with their other paratransit properties. And at this time, there aren't any other properties that have connected with Uber or other agencies such as this to provide paratransit services. And it's really different services. So public transportation and paratransit offers door-to-door services, where taxi services offer curb-to-curb. Very different services and different levels of service.
So and I tried to flesh it out with him this morning. It is different services as you just described. And there's an individuality to Uber services as opposed to Transit Plus, where one company has several vehicles that are dedicated towards a service. So I kind of get the complexities that are involved and how it would be a challenge to operationalize this through a company like Uber. Thanks.
Okay, all right. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Fare collection strategy.
Yes, we've got Kirk Cumming here, Manager of IT, to present.
Thank you. So this is simply an extension of the request that was made through the budget process in March of 2024. I just wanted to sort of let you know where we're at with this process and sort of what the time is being used for. So immediately after the budget recommendation was adopted, we went out with an RFP for consultant services for this study that we're undertaking. That has then been awarded. It's been awarded to a company out of Toronto called Left Turn Right Turn, who has done similar work for Toronto, Vancouver, and a number of other kinds of properties across Canada and North America. So they're as that was awarded September 20th, so they're going to be starting work this month. It's anticipated to be a 4-month engagement. And then so that'll be, finished in mid-February. And then so, once we've got that together, there'll be a report to the committee and to council. And so once that's created, that puts us back to, a date for the May meeting of this council committee.
And that's studying other payment fare collection options or softwares, or elaborate on what they're studying.
Yeah, it's quite comprehensive, and it's sort of a two-part approach. Part one is looking at our fare policy, and that really extends to looking at what other agencies are doing, looking at what other technologies offer, trying to get the right mix of policy and fare products and other types of this is a fairly comprehensive list of all the different things that we're looking at there. And then the second part is an upgrade plan for our technology. So taking into account what we've learned about what our policy approach is going to be, choosing the right technological path forward, and looking at the schedule approach, the overall budget, that sort of thing, and trying to get a proper plan together so that we can hit the ground running and really get something out there. And it's going to be looking at, like I said, it's going to be looking at other agencies, but it's also going to be looking at our own internal data and sort of what kind of data we have that can sort of inform this decision making and really make it based on fact and
So you're going to come back with fare change recommendations potentially?
That's on the table. It's we're looking at the broader range of fare collection policy, from the products that we offer to the ways that people can pay to the way that we enforce those policies and that sort of thing.
And are you going to come back? You're going to come back with a recommendation of who to use to start implementing a new fare collection system, or what all are you coming back with?
Yeah, I think
to the next step.
Probably it's going to be things like, looking at what are those different, there's different, we had discussed this, I think, in previous meetings, where there's things like, tapping with your credit card or using an app on your phone.
Different options on how you can pay, right?
Right, there's
the implementation of that.
I beg your pardon?
The implementation, like what we can implement.
Yeah, it's sort of taking
Fare
a look at what those options are, what companies offer, what mix of different options, and who's the most advantageous companies to start looking at out there, who's used what approaches successfully, or not so successfully out there in the market, and then coming up with a procurement approach, so what's the...
So when you say procurement approach, you're going to come up with a recommendation then that we will put out an RFP?
Most likely, but there's different approaches. Maybe you go with an RFI, or maybe you have some sort of another third company handling it.
Sure.
Maybe you go through,
Okay.
seller. There's other options.
So then there's a lot of steps yet.
After that, yes.
Is it essentially buying software, like a package from a company, or?
Most likely there will be a hardware component. There are some potential options to have like a phased approach, for example, where there's start off with a software only approach that then moves to an option with hardware. But that's, once again, something that we're going to be looking at what those different options are and see how those have potentially succeeded in different markets and what the best approach should be.
Add-ons to what we currently have, or possibly changing our whole system?
That's actually part of what we're looking at as well,
Right.
is what do we do with our existing system? Yeah.
Because they have all these fare boxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Councilor Chambers?
Yeah, so, and thank you for your report, or request for extension. I've had the opportunity to previous world travel fairly extensively around the world. A lot of the major metropolis cities, and as recent as this June in Calgary, note that they have areas, in Calgary, it's more for their LRT, but also for their bus, where you can go and actually pay at a pay station and then use that ticket to board the bus. We don't have that here in Winnipeg. Is there any thought of implementing that with this report?
Once again, one of the options that's on the table, it's something that's brought up in the Winnipeg Transit Master Plan as well. It's called off-board fare payment. And it may be something that is going to be important for some of the infrastructure alignments that we've looked at for some of the corridors. You know, where you have, for example, a corridor that goes down the middle of a major thoroughfare. That off-board fare payment would be an important part of enabling that. So that's another thing that we're looking at, is that, you know, when we're going to need that. And whether.
Is there any evidence that those types of payments options hasten the ability to get people boarded on a bus?
Absolutely, that is part of it. Yes, and once again, you know, the time required and then the impact on on-time performance is one of the things that we're going to be taking a look at. So, you know, for example, if we're going to be recommending a certain technology, we want to make sure that that technology doesn't adversely impact our boarding times, which would then adversely impact our schedule times. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So if there's no more questions, can I have a motion to receive the report for a request or requesting the extension? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Okay,
Thank you.
wait a minute, who's doing wave? Oh, no, you're not doing wave. Racing on it. Okay, that's okay. All right, thank you. Thank you. All righty.
Madam Chairperson, if the committee wishes, we could suspend the rules for item 15 now, as that is also a parking related.
Sure, let's do that. Sure.
So
Okay, motion to suspend the rules. Counselor Barba? So moved. All in favor? Carried. All right, gentlemen, wave.
Yeah, you know. All right, so Madam Chair, councilors, this report provides an updated analysis on the Winnipeg Wheelchair Accessible Vehicle, also known as Winnipeg Wave, pilot project, which was launched in May 2022 and will end December 31, 2024. The report serves to highlight the Winnipeg Wave pilot project results, including the fact that increases in passenger trips that went from 2,565 from May to December 2022, averaging over 1,100 trips a month in 2023, which was an increase of 415% to 13,213 trips. Through August 2024, there have now been 13,292 trips this year, which would put Wave on pace to do close to 20,000 trips in 2024. This would be a further increase of nearly 50%. The accessible community told us that they would often wait 90 minutes to 2 hours for an accessible taxi prior to the launch of Winnipeg Wave. That's completely unacceptable. During the pilot project, Vehicle for Hire has seen the wait times drop to 20 minutes more than 93% of the time. And this was almost 95% in August 2024, which is nearly comparable to the wait times experienced by riders using standard vehicles. The Accessible Transportation Incentive Program, also known as ATIP, has invested in accessible drivers and accessible vehicle owners who are providing service to the community through the Wave and are making a difference. From the launch of Wave through to the end of Q2 2024, vehicle owners have been paid $144,437 in incentives, ensuring that their vehicle is available for at least 120 days per year, having it available to provide trips between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m., and for ensuring that it passes all inspections by a Vehicle for Hire enforcement officer for critical items related to accessible service. As well, from the launch of Wave to the end of Q2 2024, accessible drivers have earned over $404,000 in incentives, which includes both customer service related items and per trip bonuses. These are funds that are directly reinvested in our city by improving the livelihoods of the drivers, allowing them to earn more per trip, which allows them to spend more on their families, as well as seeing vehicle owners be provided additional funds to offset the cost of the vehicles and their maintenance. Through feedback received from the accessible community based on the trips that have been taken, over 94% of the time, drivers and the Winnipeg Wave have received a 4 or 5-star rating. This is based on nearly 4,683 trips being rated, so not insignificant. Feedback is received in a number of ways, from being rated on the app as well as a random sample of passengers being called to provide a rating or feedback. As part of the wave, drivers receive enhanced training through ILRC. Patrick brought this up this morning, so I do appreciate that. This is a dedicated 1 hour session that involves refreshers on proper securement and accessible transportation. This is a paid incentive for them also. So there's no cost to them other than their time to attend for that 1 hour. And is in addition to the regular accessible training that is required. As well, the VFH enforcement officers have a program where they perform regular inspections on the vehicles to ensure that all proper equipment is maintained at all time. And that's in addition to our normal inspection program on vehicles for hire throughout the city.
That's interior and exterior?
It is, but what they're keen on when they do these targeted inspections is the critical items related to proper securement and what's called D409 standards, which is a national standard related to accessible vehicles. They also ensure that drivers are able to properly secure passengers and can recommend retraining or even fine a driver for egregious errors. In December 2023, when the WAVE project was extended, a temporary position was approved at that time, which was planned to oversee the day-to-day operations of the program, review and analyze the reporting and data, and act as a liaison with our dispatch contractor and then in the industry. The position, due to some delays, was never hired this year, but we intend to. It's included in this recommendation to move forward with it as it becomes permanent. Quite simply, myself and my staff, and some of them are here today, have been managing this program off the side of our desk, much like Ram has been managing it off the side of his desk at Duffy's. And it's grown so much that we simply need a position to do all the work that's required so that we can get back to our normal day-to-day operations in vehicle for hire. As well, the report does recommend a change in fees, which was mentioned by Patrick this morning. This does also remove the 10% requirement. However, I do hear Patrick's comments and think that we might need to consider having it brought back in order to ensure we're incentivizing companies to maintain accessible vehicles at a certain amount. The proposal, however, does recognize those companies who have accessible vehicles and does provide the service. I should note that in 2018, when the city took over and introduced the accessibility fee, this fee was originally rolled into a significant increase to meter rates at that time. So we were thinking that this was going to be applied across the board, and it didn't end up that way because of the 10% calculation. So in essence, this has been passed along to fair paying customers since the beginning. Down the road, Vehicle for Hire would also like to continue to explore further initiatives related to WAVE service and delivering better service, including the potential to add vehicle conversion or ramp incentives to service providers. So this would help them over a longer period of time with more money in order to convert to accessible vehicles or move standard cars to accessible vans, that type of thing. As well, I do want to note, like everything in Vehicle for Hire, this is completely funded from the surcharge. So no tax dollars are paid through this program. It all comes from user fees collected through the fares and flowed back through the dispatchers. So just in closing, this project has achieved the results it was hoping for, and has mainly through the partnership in place between Vehicle for Hire, the industry, especially our contract dispatcher, Duffy's, and his general manager, Mr. Ram Boliru. And I would be remiss not to indicate how much of an effort he has put in over the last 2.5 years, 3 years to make this successful. I also really want to acknowledge all the work done on this project and the hands-on approach to working together, solving problems and turning challenges into opportunities, especially from Vehicle for Hire staff, as I mentioned, who are here. From the support from the mayor and councillors like yourselves to the service providers in the taxi industry and Vehicle for Hire, as well as the community, this project has been quite rewarding and quite significant in the community.
Mr. Chambers, you have any questions?
Well, and thank you for your presentation. And I asked the question earlier with regards to Transit Plus. Mr. Stewart gave a presentation this morning, talked about the expansion or challenges around expanding to Vehicle for Hire such as Uber. I just got an email today about Lyft now joining the market. Is there any way of leveraging one against the other to increase these
So,
types of vehicles?
so their model generally runs on a personal vehicle model. And what that would require them to do is to go out and find private citizens who have accessible vans. What that number is, I don't know. I don't even know if my contacts at MPI can nail that down. They have a specific insurance model for accessible vehicle for hire. I don't know if they have an specific vehicle model for accessible private transportation. To that end, we are leveraging them. We're leveraging them by charging them a higher rate, which they flow through. I think what that does is that allows us to, and you see it in here that we are bumping that rate up for their service while acknowledging those service providers in the community who are serving the community, making a difference, holding accessible vehicles, charging them a lower rate, which would allow us to do things like bring in ramp conversions, bring in vehicle update incentives, things like that down the road. So in that way, I think we would be leveraging that. We also have a number of other initiatives that we've kicked around that are kind of in the early stages of conceptualization around adding more accessible vehicles, how we could do that if we suddenly saw a spike and things like that. But in most cities, and I'm not 100% familiar with Lyft's offering in a lot of cities, but I know that Uber does operate Uber Wave in some cities. It's a very limited service. Sometimes it's also done in partnership where they've gone out and signed agreements with taxis, where you order an Uber Wave through the Uber app and you end up getting a Duffy's taxi, as an example.
Yeah, no, and to Ms. Platt's comments, Transit Plus is door to door. And this is more curb to curb.
And we continue. I mean, we've had a good partnership with Transit Plus. They've done until they've launched their new app recently, they had done about 20 to 25% of the trips earlier this year and throughout some of 2023 on Wave. And so using Overflow. So that's building or tapping into that capacity that exists and allowing more people to move around. And we've had ongoing discussions about changing the training, having drivers train through Transit Plus a little bit higher level, having some interchangeability, because a number of the Transit Plus contract holders are also taxi companies. So they're using different vehicles, but they're running a transportation service. So, there's options to continue for us to work together, which we have, and continue to build.
So just so we're clear, the rates that the Transit Plus users pay are transit fare rates, and the rates that the Wave users pay are taxi rates.
Yep,
right?
that's correct.
And then now with the new software, do you think that, as we've heard great things about the new software, right? Super things. Do you think that the desire or the use of Wave will go down?
I don't think so, because there's still only so much capacity on the Transit Plus side. So to build that capacity significantly would have significant costs, right, related to additional vehicles and that. And there's still always that on-demand nature that taxis can provide, right? They tend to be at taxi stands outside of Canada Life Center, outside of the casinos, where Transit Plus doesn't sit there. It's pre-planned. It's, so there's always that. And I think people with Wave, people have really begun to acknowledge that they are going to get home. So they'll take a Transit Plus trip to a doctor's appointment, to a reservation at a restaurant, to the beginning of a Jets game where it's a known start time. And then they'll use Wave on the back end when maybe they don't know when the concert is going to end. Yeah, and so having both models really gives a lot of opportunity for options to the citizen. And it just makes those who have accessibility needs right on par with, those using standard service.
Now, do you think that there's any confusion in the service delivery, like curb to curb or door to door, or do you think some of the transit Plus users, when they use Wave, may be expecting a different level of service? Is there a little confusion?
You know what,
sometimes?
I think there could always be confusion. We've done a lot of messaging around that. Transit Plus did a lot of messaging at the beginning when they launched on Wave. To try to alleviate that. Teresa, myself and Cody just did a presentation to the Transportation Options Network for Seniors. And we talked about the differences and similarities of the system. And that was one of the things we talked about was the difference in door-to-door service versus curb-to-curb service. So I think there's always going to be that feeling out there, no matter how much messaging we do. But you know what, the more we message it, the more we remind people. And as we continue to work on taxi drivers to bring up even the level of service on curb to curb begins to improve. And we've seen that through Wave. That as they've delivered Transit Plus trips, there's a lot of drivers who have taken more, they've invested more in themselves in doing that because they also recognize that they are getting customer service incentives, they are being rated, and there's an opportunity for them to make more money.
Okay, Councillor Sharma had a question?
Thank you. Grant, you talked a little bit about the wait times, I think. Did you give us this year's wait time? Can you just go through them again, please?
Yeah, for sure. So across the board, in 2022, from May until December, we saw wait times about 83 to 84% of the time. They were about 20 minutes. So we were trying, like, that was a big step forward from that 90 to 2 hours. We saw that significantly jump in 2023, especially later in the year. And part of why I would say we saw that happen is we made a few tweaks to the incentives. And we added in a flat, on top of the regular incentives, we added in a flat $10 during the day and $25 overnight incentive. And the drivers really built their excitement towards the program. And it really saw them choosing Wave. It was this, so to speak, tipping point of them choosing a Wave trip over street hail at Walmart type thing. And so they moved towards that, and we saw that come up to about 93% in 2023. And through this year, August, it was sitting at over 95% within 20 minutes. So wait times have held significantly, which, was a bit of a concern when we saw them climb. They'll never be 100% within that. It's not possible. We have too many factors like, winter blizzards and construction and stuff that just impact it. Times of the day too, of when things are asked for or when trips are asked for. So, but to sit at 95% of the time, a 20-minute wait,
Right.
is impactful.
Feedback have we gotten from the customers again? You may have touched on it. Sorry, there's a lot of information.
No, that's fine. As I said, over 95% of the time we receive 4 and 5 star feedback, and we do get that in a number of ways.
How do they do that? Yeah.
Yeah, so if you book your trip through the Winnipeg Wave app, smartphone app, you can go on just like you would be able to rate anything else. How was your trip? 4 stars, 5 stars, whatever. And we receive that feedback. If you book it through the website, you actually get a text code back, and you hit the, provide feedback link in the text code, and you can provide feedback that way. And then what we did too, because we recognized
And who
also,
does that information go to?
it comes into a report through the dispatch system, and we pull that report.
So it goes to
Essentially us.
you.
Yeah,
direct.
essentially
Okay,
us. So
good.
again, that new position that's talked about it, right now we're pulling these reports on the side. That new position is going to be doing that, analyzing that data. The other thing that's been happening is we recognize that regardless of, providing more technology and more options for people to access the system, a large number of accessible users still call the old traditional 204-9864 Wave number to get dispatch service. And so we would track all those trips that are done that way, the traditional phone call method. And Duffy's actually set up a program where they would randomly sample a certain number of trips each month and then call those passengers back, asking them for feedback on their trip, to rate their trip and provide comments if they so choose. And they provide us that list generally every month, so we're getting it. We've switched to quarterly ratings now, starting in
Is
September.
anyone way faster to hail that ride?
No, it's really in what works for you. There's a number of accessible users who may have other challenges And so using the traditional phone, we also find that a lot of caregivers, adult children will book trips for their parents. I've done that myself recently for elderly parents and had a good experience. I mean, here's a situation where you're trying to get parents to for home from the hospital, and it makes it easy when you can just go on an app and call for a ride. So yeah, we do find, I think I'm actually a little surprised that so many people still use the traditional phone, but we are seeing an uptick of smartphone users, and that we've also found, and maybe it's a bit of a socioeconomic thing, that a number of smartphone users don't have data plans. They use Wi-Fi. So if they're away from their Wi-Fi, they don't have some of the features that are built into that app use that you would normally get don't exist when you're away from that. So
Thank you. Can we dive into that surcharge? We heard from Patrick Stewart about, and we saw in the report, are we de-incentivizing the drivers with changing the surcharge the way it is in the report?
I don't think we're disincentivizing them. Right now, they are, like I said, when we originally approved the meter rates, we built this 7 cents in thinking it was going to be across the board. This 10% was created and added in, and so it kind of created a discrepancy in the industry to begin with. Companies have worked to get to that 10%, so they've been able to essentially opt out of that. We're looking at this from a sustainability
So
standpoint.
currently, it is.
Currently, it's 7 cents a trip.
Yeah.
When your fleet is, when you have at least 10% of your fleet providing trips each month
It's
is
accessible.
accessible.
Yeah.
And when I say that, that's an overly simplistic calculation of it, because there's a lot of work that goes into confirming that 10%,
Right.
the way it's structured. It's not just as simple as saying you have 300 vans, or you have 300 vehicles, you need 30 vans. It's when those vans provide trips, how many times a week, things like that. And so we spend our enforcement team has spent quite a bit of time confirming where that 10% lands at times when we're right on the bubble.
So 7 cents per trip, 10% accessible, that's current.
That's
And in the report, you're suggesting something a little bit different.
Yeah, so in the report, I'm suggesting that we leave that rate the same as it is for limos, no change. They'll never be accessible limos. We'll just leave it as is. It's already built in. Don't rock the boat there.
But even with, you're saying limos aren't part of the equation, but they, like a lot now, what we see in terms of that limousine service and sorting is they have those party buses that can also be used to.
They're completely outside of our regulation because of the size. Yeah. Yeah. So then we're.
The personal transportation.
Yeah, and so then we're recommending they go from 7 cents to 10 cents, which will largely impact companies like Uber and Lyft. And they have the flexibility to do that. They're just gonna build it right in. If you've taken an Uber,
And have we heard anything from them? It's okay, so that's the.
They're paying-
transportation vehicles.
they're
What
paying
about
that
the taxis?
across the country in other
Sure.
jurisdictions anyway, so
Okay.
it's no
And
big
then,
deal.
Madam Chair, the taxis,
Right.
what do you?
So right now, they're 7 cents when they have less than 10% of their fleet.
Mhm.
That is where we spend a lot of our time confirming. It can fluctuate, and it does fluctuate for them because it's all in how they deliver that service.
So it's 7 currently and you want to go.
We want to go to 3.
Three.
And the reason we want to go to 3 is we recognize that they're the service providers and they're the ones that we are funneling right now, largely the beneficiaries of the program. Again, as Patrick said, on that Uber piece, we're looking at saying, if you're not going to be part of the solution, then you should pay at a higher rate. So we're going to bring that down. Hearing what Patrick's saying though, and having the concern around a company maybe not feeling or making the decision that now, if they're going to pay the 3%, let's just dump our accessible vans. I think there's always going to be a market for those accessible vans, and I think there's a place for them. But I mean, I do see an opportunity here to create almost a disincentive to doing that in saying, if you, as long as you maintain at least 10% of your fleet as accessible, you pay 3 cents across the board. If you drop below that 10% for whatever reason, then it would revert to 7 cents. So almost like a penalty for reverting kind of thing. So then a company is going to be incentivized because they're going to keep that drivers are going to be able to keep that 4
So they would
cents.
go to 7, what they're currently paying,
Right.
right? But you're lowering it to 3
Right.
if they have the.
if they
10%.
continue, and they continue to be part of the solution.
What did you hear from the industry on that, the taxi industry?
From my discussions, I heard that it would be like having a rate across the board is palatable. And they understand they need to be part of the solution here. It was built in. And back to what we're funding through the incentives is back to those drivers, back to those vehicle owners, back to the dispatch companies providing the service. So we're pumping to the tune of $600,000-700,000 potentially back into the service providers who are actually being part of the
So
solution.
Grant, what is the rate again if they don't have 10% accessible? It would be
7 cents.
7 cents.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in terms of your enforcement abilities and capabilities, I mean, we're making sure that we're not spending more on those resources than we're recovering in terms of those 7 versus 3 cents.
Yeah, so when we've run the model, we didn't just pick these numbers. I didn't just pick these numbers out of the air. We've been working on this for about a year now, running these numbers and watching the changes made in the industry and that. And when I've run the model based upon where we're at for current trips, projecting out for increases, because I anticipate at least holding its own trip-wise and then some, and future growth, we're looking at making sure this is sustainable with all the costs involved and stuff like that. And so that's where we landed on it. We're looking at saying we can offset the decrease with an increase on another side because of the growth, because of the piece that's happening there, right? And I mean, realistically, from the taxi industry, it's going to cost a little bit more on the PTP side that users are going to have to pay. So that's helps them from a competition standpoint.
Alrighty. Any questions? Any further questions? If not, do we have a motion to receive this good information?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Carried.
Just to clarify though, this is a recommendation that goes to council, not
Yep.
receive this information. Okay.
Sorry. Yep.
So,
Okay, while they're here, instead of maybe bumping
15.
into your next one, let's do 15, okay? So this is a motion for street parking for veterans. That they
no,
want,
this is Counselor Dobson's.
yeah. That they want to have complimentary street parking.
Is this like year round?
We've dealt with this
Yes.
before. haven't
Yeah,
we?
this was February of 2023. This was back in front of this that committee.
Or similar.
It's very similar,
Yeah.
but again, not much has changed with regards to the uptake in our program. The program has always been available and we certainly offer, other than
Just-
Vancouver.
let's Pause, can we just, again, I want to know what the motion's asking. Just to be clear, what number is it? 15, just before we go in here. So it's Counselor Dodson moved it. And he's essentially asking for,
Complimentary year-round on-street parking for any vehicle displaying a veteran license plate, subject to parking limits and any other posted regulations.
Was there any, is MPI able to tell us how many
Yes.
plates are issued with veterans? And then you've done a cost calculation presumably on what lost revenue would be?
If we just took the raw number, and although I just saw this late yesterday, we haven't had a chance to reach to Grant's contact at MPI to get an updated version if there's more plates on there. I mean, it's certainly something we could calculate, although I can tell you the history of the number of permits that or the number of coupon booklets that have been applied for.
Right, so
is
they
still
can
relatively.
apply for a
Yep.
coupon book
Yes, they can.
and then they get their free
what
parking.
is the
Yes.
process for that?
Well, it's an online application. You can go through 311.
But does it have anything to do with the plate or just if you're a veteran?
You have to meet certain criteria of being a veteran, which is very, very broad, but you also have to register your vehicle, and then we would send you out a booklet of scratch meter coupons.
When did the coupon booklets come out and how did they come about?
How did they come about? This actually kind of came out, this has been, we've had them for years to meet another couple of other needs, but we've transitioned over as an easy way for us to be able to provide that complimentary parking.
But
to
Randy,
the
how did
veterans.
it come about? Like, when did we bring that policy in? how and why and when? I'm just curious what the history is. Do we know?
I'm thinking
The
it's
veteran
20
one or the
The
coupon?
coupon, what's existing right now?
The coupon.
Oh, probably 2010, I believe, is when we started printing them.
2012, somewhere in
Well,
that. Yeah.
rather, was it a result of a council motion or Peter saying yes?
Peter saying yes.
Is it
Our
okay?
clerk has a lot of knowledge.
Yes, it was a council decision on October 24th, 2012.
Okay.
It's for the win.
It's written.
And
It's-
because, you know, I'm just wondering, like, how is that program going? You know, do we need to change anything with the current program?
Given again, that this program has been well fleshed out and people are aware of it, we're still seeing very little uptake for the number of permits. I think there's 24, I think for this year. And I think last year there was, 59 applications that were made. So
And how many things do they get in a booklet?
$20 worth. So it's about, 10 hours of parking.
For the year?
Yes.
Yeah, what is the dollar value that we normally spend on that?
Yeah, you know what, they changed them.
No, I'm
No,
just
I'm gonna
really
be, you're
the
gonna
whole
embarrass me because I don't
program.
remember what the on-street rates are because we reduced them, but there's, yeah, it's just valid it's a scratch coupon, so it's good for 2 hours of parking at a time.
You know, what I'm saying is, what did we spend on this last year? This program?
Yeah, probably.
$2,000. They also do get free parking on November 11th.
Plus also on June the 6th,
Yeah,
which is
Armistice
another,
Day.
yes, as well.
June the sixth?
Yeah.
VDD?
Oh, VD,
Yes.
yeah.
So they get coupons, they can get 10 hours of free parking. And they're all aware of it, or I'm sure within the veteran circles, right? They would be aware of it.
Yes.
Um,
I mean, I just remind this committee that, there's lots of other cities with large military bases, Halifax, Victoria, Edmonton, that do not provide any. Even the nation's capital, Ottawa, only provides, I think, Remembrance Day parking. So although he's quoting Vancouver, which is one of the anomalies, we're actually the second most giving out of some complimentary parking across Canada. There's lots of cities that don't even do it.
would you be able to provide that information to the counselors?
We can certainly put something together. I think that's probably contained in the last report, which is easy enough for us to.
Yeah, when was that last report? That was,
2023.
Yes.
2023?
right, that was a Nason, line thing. Okay. Okay, well, that's good to know. So, someone want to make a motion on this report? I think there's a lot of information that we have and that there's a lot out there for veterans.
So we're accepting this as information. So moved.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Carried. And that's with the intent that they can have a verbal update to the counselors.
Yeah.
Super. Okay, thank you
Just
very
for
much.
Clarification, BD day.
Yes.
Yes.
BD days.
Yes.
Okay, great. Now we've got Public Works.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So, Madam Chairperson, if you wanted to speed things up, items 7, 8, and 10, I believe, are to be received as information.
Sure.
So if you wanted to, we can just move one motion for those.
No, I have questions about the one of the items.
Pull the item.
Okay.
You know that, I emailed you.
One ten?
I emailed you as well.
Pull the
On item 10?
Item. No.
No.
10.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's start with 6 and we'll work our way through.
5.
Sorry, 5, sorry, 5.
That's yours.
Okay, item number 5.
So, yeah, I'm going to move deferral on this for 180 days. As mentioned earlier this morning, there are discussions that are happening with respect to the technology itself that I would like to see what comes of those discussions before we move this motion forward, recognizing that this motion is looking holistically at a Vision Zero strategy and making our roads safer. Again, speaking to the issue of 2022, where we had, it was quite an anomaly in terms of the amount of road fatalities that we had in 2022, and wanting to have a strategy on making our roads safe safer in terms of drivers that impact pedestrians, cyclists, both seniors and children. So again, not wanting to get in the way of the discussions that are currently taking place, I'm requesting a deferral of this motion for 180 days.
So this would be a recommendation to council to provide this committee with an extension of time of 180 days to make a recommendation to council.
Correct.
Sure. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Okay, so now we'll move on to the Arlington Bridge.
So the administration is requesting an extension for up to 60 days.
60 days. So that brings it to
December, well, be at the end of November meeting.
the end of November meeting.
Brad, what are you working on exactly here? You're,
The senior administration is reviewing the report that was submitted.
right, but let's put on the record what is gonna be, in I'm just reading here, just to refresh.
What we're gonna do about
The options
We're
to
gonna look
rehabilitate.
the options to rehabilitate the existing bridge.
Mhm.
And it says in this here 180 days, but you're only requesting 60?
Well, that was back in the spring, it was 180. It was supposed to come to October meeting, so now we're saying December meeting.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, we're all keen to hear about it, so,
And does the area counselor know?
Yeah, there's been discussions
Yeah.
already with the area
Yes, I believe
council.
there has.
yeah, we read about them.
thank
Okay,
you.
all in favor?
Aye.
Carried.
Who will move this motion?
Council Chambers. Okay, item number 7.
This is the annual report that we provide. That identifies the street renewal projects that we didn't incorporate active transportation or new sidewalk locations on. So this is for 2023, so it's a year removed right now.
Why?
So
Why?
the report is the same as last year's report, all the information up front. So the only thing that's really changed is the actual locations that are identified in the appendice, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on those.
Okay, so just so that we're all clear here, this is, if something is on the active transportation network map, is that correct?
Yes.
Then you look, when you're doing a road renewal, then you
Yeah.
look at it and, you know, due to a variety of reasons, if it can or can't be done, you don't take that money and put it somewhere else. It just stays in the road budget as roads.
That's correct, because we budget on a parametric basis, and we don't
That's a
specifically
big
identify
it's parametric.
It means that we look at it on a square meter basis based on previous years' projects. So we kind of average it out between projects. So a street reconstruction will cost so much per square meter, and we'll take that into account. And on those ones, we'll do we estimate about 80% sidewalk replacement on a renewal. We might estimate 50% sidewalk replacement, but the actual AT facilities, we don't specifically budget for them, so it just stays within the program. And generally, like from what you can see here, is like most of the time we are incorporating there's extenuating circumstances as to why not.
So to Mark Coho's point of having another set of eyes look at it, I mean, I hear him like when I had looked at my Lakeshore Chancellor one, it was like, well, this one didn't make any sense. I've got another one that would have made a lot more sense, but that road renewal wasn't up for renewal. That road wasn't up for renewal. So I guess one could say, well, sure, you can look at it, but we're not moving the money for the pathway to a different location, is what you're saying.
No, but we're getting pathways then that are required to get done within the program. So like we aren't specifically budgeting for them within the renewal program. So like some projects are going to come in high, some are going to come in low, and it all kind of averages out in the end.
No, I hear you on that. Okay. Anyone have any questions or comments on this? So when do you bring the next report forward?
It should be next September. It should be every September.
Okay.
We just missed a month.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so this is a report to be received as information. Would someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Counselor Sharma, all in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Okay, item number 8. I think Counselor Sharma had a question on this one.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the Northwest Hydro Corridor project and the extensions on either side of what's currently placed there. We finished a certain leg of that project not too long ago. Just wondering why it's moving to the following year.
I can speak to this. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go.
I can speak to this. I checked, I heard about this question and I checked in with staff. We are planning on, it's not going to be moving to 2026. It's in 2025. The budget item shows it as 2026, but we are making a fast call in the 2025 budget. So we'll start the work on it in 2025, but it will extend into 2026.
I think last time when we did the first leg, it was, all the work was just done in 1 year, wasn't it, David? It started in the spring and then we had the opening and.
No, it carried through to the following year.
Did it
We did,
carry
yeah,
through?
we didn't do
some
the
base
cross.
work?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. It's the base work, yeah. And will those two legs, the Dale and Marshall leg and the casino leg, be done at the same time?
We're still working out the details.
Right.
There are some conversations we're still having with some of the stakeholders,
Yeah.
specifically Hydro. But the intent is to get started on it and we'll know more close to the start of the project.
So the intent is to start next year and finish the following year?
Yeah.
Because we need
You know,
those two seasons, right?
Yeah.
On the ground there to get it done?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what do we do in this report then? Do we still leave it the way it is or you're doing a first call?
Yeah, well, again, right now, the moving, this is our first cut of the proposed. There can be changes before the budget's approved.
Yeah.
So the reason why this report comes out with the detail sheet as well is to give everybody a first look at what the proposals are. Through the budget process and through our presentations, that can still change. This isn't a finalized capital detail sheet. This is a proposed capital detail sheet. So it can change. The one thing is that we had to dedicate funds to our Sherbrooke project, right? So that was our first priority. And then to draw off of this. So even though the funding's identified in 26, if we get that approval, we'll do, as David said, we'll do a first call for 25. Shouldn't impact anything.
It seems like it keeps moving, this target on this.
Well,
project.
it's like anything else. Again, without Hydro's concurrence at the north end, what are you gonna do? And so you've got to ensure the projects that are available to go now get that funding support.
Are we waiting for Hydro to?
It's not that we're waiting. These things are constantly being negotiated, and we've had a number of license agreement negotiations as a result of.
Is everything in place for this?
I don't think everything's in place.
Not everything, but we're making forward progress. There are a lot of different stakeholder groups within Hydro that all have to be satisfied before they sign off. And so we're working out those details.
Yeah, we don't have a signed, like originally when we did, and again, this discussion we've had in the past is having that blanket license agreement with Hydro for the use of those corridors and trying to use that first cut of the Northwest Hydro corridor, that work that we did, we thought that would be kind of like our standard template for all license agreements with Hydro. We're still trying to achieve that, I believe, but we're not getting totals. I don't.
So
There's some nuances to each one.
and I was gonna, sorry, there's specific
Yes,
nuances.
yeah.
Can we talk about the neighborhood greenway on Leela or we can offline later? You want to touch on it right now? The neighborhood greenway on Leela?
Yeah, we can talk about that offline if
Yeah,
you'd like.
because the alignment and there were some things that we were working on together a while back.
Yeah, let's talk about that offline.
And then to Mr. Coho's point about his presentation related to,
Elijah Rodier
yeah,
overpass and the AT connection.
yes,
This was discussed in detail amongst many staff at within Public Works. We got the design, the concept for the underpass. However, the costing for it was very significant, a lot more than I think we expected or
It
anticipated.
was over $10 million to do that.
Multi-millions of dollars.
And did you tell?
It's just, it was an underpass under La Jamodier that connected, Falls Beck with, Ravelston.
So it's not
Just a little section, 10 million.
wow.
Yeah.
And are they?
There is also some pathway from Panet to the underpass, but it requires stabilization of the water and waste pond. So there was a lot of crossing a railway. There's a lot of complications involved with it.
My understanding was this was discussed through the ATAC, but it sounded from the presentation like there may not have been 100%, like that message didn't get out to all members of ATAC, like Winnipeg, but I'm a little bit surprised by that, but we can share that information. I anticipate that certain stakeholders like Marco would say, I don't care what the cost is, no matter what the cost is, you've got to move forward with it. But something that's in the multi-million dollars, there's probably better projects to spend that money on, like the bridge downtown to connect to Osmond Village for one. Like we have to be sort of cautious about using the city's money wisely. And although they have, like they said, they don't like the fact they've got to go 700 meters deep to it to connect, that still is a viable connection for cyclists. So at this time, we just can't afford it.
So how does that fit then? I mean, I hear what you're saying, but how does that fit in our transportation master plan where we're looking at multimodal, we're looking at increasing our active transportation and cycling strategies? How does it all play in?
It was a low priority connection to begin with, and we are, as part of that Concordia overpass project, we are doing the path along Concordia under the roadway bridge.
Yeah.
Plus, there's also the connection at State Pond Road as well. So there's two connections that are fairly close by.
So enhancements and improvements are being made to AT. It's just not, we're not building the Cadillac version of the AT in this area.
Okay, all right. And then this is a draft, sort of rough draft budget that can vary as item point number one notes. Okay, so can we have a motion then to receive this as information?
Just one other question, David, these sidewalks, non-regional sidewalks, no locations have been selected just yet.
No, we talk in this report about how the pedestrian cycling strategy is coming up with a new toolkit to look at putting different sidewalks into different bins so they can be prioritized with a scoring system, and then we can proceed in the future with moving forward with sidewalks throughout the city.
I'd like to talk with you about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor?
Come to.
Aye.
Carried. Okay, all right, now. Number 9 and number 10. So number 9 is, this is something that I think Councillor Wyatt would want to hear.
And I refer this for 30 days to the next Public Works meeting.
I think they were going to come back.
Yeah, we were going to ask for an extension for this,
Oh.
but
120.
Councillor does want to talk about it. We can do that too. We're asking for a 120-day extension, just because the project's more complicated than we thought.
So moved.
And then you can talk offline with
Yes,
us.
we will.
All right, all in favor? Carried.
And
Okay, to come see asphalt plant.
yeah, the counselor would be interested. He's the one that
Well,
you want to report back in 90 days.
Well, we, as per last discussion at the was that the email of the information went to the
Right.
council and copied the chair, and we've received no comments
perfect.
from the ward councillor.
So receive this information.
Information, all in favor? Carried. Gravel road maintenance south of the perimeter.
Yeah, this one we just we're requesting a 60-day extension.
6 hours, sorry?
60 day.
Oh.
I wish 6 hours.
Okay, okay, motion.
Okay, but, you know, and again, this is, you know, in all seriousness, this is very important to not only myself, but the area residents.
And including ourselves.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, 60 days.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Number 12, no parking on St. Mary's Road between Fermor and
Have you had a chance to talk to the area councillor on this?
I met with the area council on a separate matter and this came up in conversation. I think that how we'll handle this is that the traffic management branch of transportation will work with the parking authority on this. So it'll be sort of a joint project. At this time, I would ask for 150 days to work on this, but if we can get it back sooner, then we will bring it back.
Up to 150 days.
Up to,
Okay, motion on the
So
floor,
moved.
up to 150, all in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Number 13, this is an interesting one.
Yeah.
This was the Louis Escobar speed humps when I had the area.
So,
Anyways,
I still get tons of calls, emails, social media tags, with respect to traffic on, Rudy Trapeze. It is somewhat exacerbated during the summertime with traffic to the golf course. Area residents are becoming concerned with their pedestrian safety. There's no sidewalks. It's not that well lit, and tons of concerns there. So looking for a traffic study to see what additional safety measures are warranted and can be implemented.
through the chair, can I reach out to your office to get more of their background information from these citizens? Okay, I've spoken briefly to traffic management. We will aim to get this done within 180 days. We may need to collect data on this, and if it's sort of the end of the golfing season, so I may have to wait till the spring. But if it's an issue here, we want to take a look at it and the previous work on it.
what are you gonna do? Like, not, like I hear your point,
Yeah.
but what are you gonna do? You put more speed humps, then you just fill in the whole road, they raise up the road, right? Like,
Maybe more speed humps, maybe the your speed equals message signs.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to put like the distance between the speed humps, I forget, the traffic calming measures. I forget when we installed them. They're problematic to begin with, so nobody can actually speed through that location and hit those speed bumps because they're almost projectiles if you sped. So there's not.
I recall the area.
I'm not sure why they're saying they're speeding, like somebody's accelerating to slow down at the next speed hump versus from the access of the monastery to Waverly, that's a granular roadway at that point. And that area is a granular road, right? But that area where the residents are, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah,
Like
but-
if there was something we
Where
could,
the granular road is, there's no houses.
no, but that's where your speed, that's where
Yeah.
you're, like,
Like-
there's very few people now that if they can go to Waverly, they take Waverly.
Yeah.
Cause there's no speed reductions or traffic concerns there. But on the other stretch,
gravel to get.
it's not something you speed through.
Yeah. No,
So if
I agree.
we wanted it,
Partial side.
there's pieces that aren't, right?
Yeah. We can offline.
Yeah, I'd like to talk offline and get some observations.
So what do you want?
Up to 180.
Okay,
So
so
moved.
all in favor?
All right.
Carried.
Traffic, number 14. I liken this area to Dakota Avenue, passing College Jean Sauvé, coming up to Dakota Community Center. It's a bit of a blind curve, much like Allegheny here on Dalhousie Drive, or Allegheny Drive to Dalhousie. It's a bit of a blind curve. And there's a daycare right there. There is a crosswalk, but it's not lit.
Right.
There's no lighting or anything there, so.
It's just the curb cuts, I believe.
Yeah. So looking to see if there's any flashing beacons or any other safety measures, increased signage, that would help slow down drivers, making them aware they're coming up to, well, I think there's two daycares in the area.
We have some new staff within the traffic management branch, and because this is a school site, there may be some changes we need to make. So I will take this back and we'll investigate. I'm going to ask for 150 days.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Okay,
And we dealt with
that's it.
15.
Motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Okay, carried.
Right.
Okay, let's go. Perfect.